In a massive turn of events, Russia's Foreign Affairs Minister Sergey Lavrov has warned Ukraine and United States for orchestrating the drone attack on President Putin. Now, he's gone on to say that we should not wait for any provocation from Ukraine and there will be consequences for the United States. He further also added that President Zelensky is a puppet in the hands of the West. Previously, Putin's spokesperson had also said that the attack had been undoubtedly done with Washington's support. He'd also said that Russia knew it was selecting the targets and Ukraine was merely implementing US plans. But the Kremlin spokesperson had no solid evidence to support the claim as far as the involvement of the United States is concerned. However, the United States has denied Russian claims of it masterminding an alleged drone attack. The U.S. National Spokesperson John Kirby called it a ludicrous claim and further said that Putin's spokesperson was just lying. Now, this happened just a day after Russia accused Ukraine of planning an attack to assassinate their president, Vladimir Putin. Ukraine has also said that it had nothing to do with this alleged attack. Meanwhile, Ukraine has also accused Moscow of staging the incident in order to escalate the war. US and Ukrainian officials have also voiced skepticism about this attack, with President Zelensky saying that Putin is looking for ways to motivate Russians to continue with this war. Even though Russian attacks have continued unabated, 21 people were killed in Kherson on Wednesday. There is yet no sign of an intensification on Moscow's part. Let's also now listen in to the accusations that have been put forth by Russia and reactions that are coming in both from President Zelensky and the United States.
If you believe that as soon as the United States and Ukraine rejected the accusations, we should stop thinking what we know about. This is not the case, and the ability of our Ukrainian and Western friends to lie is very well known, and the entire situation is illustrating the crisis, which is much deeper than just the behavior of the regime headed by Zelensky.
The attempts to disown this, both by Kyiv and by Washington, are of course absolutely ridiculous. We know very well that decisions about such terrorist attacks are made not in Kyiv, but in Washington. And Kyiv does what it is told to do. Not every time, Kyiv is given the right to choose means of implementing them. This is also often dictated from across the ocean. We know this well and are aware of this. To divide the Kremlin's claim by two or not, it does not matter to us. But in Washington, they must clearly understand that we know this, that they are behind the attack.
We're still trying to gather information about what happened, and we just don't have conclusive evidence one way or the other. I know there's lots of questions, but we just don't have conclusive evidence. One thing I can tell you for certain is that the United States was not involved in this incident in any way, contrary to Mr. Peskov's lies. And that's what they are, just lies. Over the past few days, we've also seen Russia continue to launch dozens of missiles and armed drones into Ukraine, striking civilian homes and killing innocent Ukrainians, including shoppers at a supermarket. Russia is continuing to wage a brutal war against the Ukrainian people, and we're committed to continuing to support Ukraine as they defend their country from that aggression, including, as you just saw this week, with yet another package of security assistance, drawdown authority for the president. Have you seen any Peskov press conferences? I won't even begin to try to estimate why that man says what he says, or what was behind that. Although I will say, from the very beginning, the Russians have been trying to paint this war as some sort of fight with the West against Russia, NATO against Russia, the United States against Russia. So it perfectly fits in his frame. The framing that President Putin has tried to label this war as, like it was some sort of existential threat to Mother Russia, and of course it's not. Russia's the aggressor here. They had diplomatic options on the table before they decided to roll across the border into Ukraine, and they ignored all those options to try to find some sort of diplomatic solution and some sort of peaceful way out of this. They decided war. They're continuing to fight that war. Let's not lose the bigger picture here. It's not like Mr. Putin has to invent new reasons to kill innocent Ukrainians. He keeps doing it over and over and over again. Now, whether he's going to use this as some sort of pretext is up to him. But just in the last 24 hours, he's bombing shoppers at a supermarket. So the violence just continues one way or the other.
I can repeat this message, and I think it will at least be understandable for everybody. We don't attack Putin or Moscow. We fight on our territory. We are defending our villages and cities. We don't have, enough weapon for this. That's why we don't use it anywhere. For us, that is the deficit. We can't spend it. And we didn't attack Putin. We leave it to tribunal.
So which way is the war really headed? We have with us senior journalist Peter Zalmaev, who's taken out the time and joined us this afternoon. Peter, we appreciate you taking out the time and joining us. First things first, I want to go back in time about 48 hours to the first videos that were released by Russia and the allegations that they made against Kyiv. The allegation against them was that this was an alleged assassination bid against their president. How is Ukraine responding to this?
Well, the Ukraine has responded as it always has. It's left this sort of strategic ambiguity when it comes to strikes within Russia's territory. It does not take credit for any of those strikes. In fact, it insinuates that, there could be armed opposition to Vladimir Putin inside Russia, or it could, whether on the part of the fledgling opposition members or members of his own elites, such as oligarchs who have lost a lot of money as a result of this war. So that's the official position of the Ukrainian government. And there's something to be said about how Kremlin would benefit from staging this as a false flag operation, to blame it on the Ukrainians. I believe a very strong consideration in favor of this version, that it was in fact staged and orchestrated by the Russians themselves, other than some of the things we saw in the video with men crawling over this dome where the strike happened.
Yeah.
This looks very, very iffy and strange and suspicious. But I think the larger narrative is that Russia has been trying to dissuade Western countries from continuing to supply Ukraine with weapons. So this could be seen as another attempt, a desperate attempt, to send this message to Washington. You stop the sending weapons to Ukraine, or else look what it's doing. You cannot control Ukraine. It's a veritable monkey with a grenade.
Interesting that you're saying that, because 24 hours after the first video that was put out by Russia, now they've in fact gone on to claim that the United States has orchestrated this entire alleged assassination attempt. How is Ukraine responding to these claims that in fact it was all decided in the United States and it was Ukraine just implementing it?
This is nothing new. From the very beginning of this war, even from the beginning of 2014, when the war actually began, it's been going on, let me remind you, for almost 9 years now. The Russians have claimed that Ukraine lacks agency, that it's a puppet at the hands of Western imperial powers bent on dominating the world, and Russia in particular. And so this is another way of saying that, Ukraine has no say-so in the matter. Behind it are NATO powers and Washington, the so-called Anglo-Saxons, as the Russian propaganda calls it. This is once again, this is to play to the audiences, Russian audiences. Obviously, no one will believe it, outside of Russia. I hope Americans obviously know what's up. They would never encourage something like this. But this is also probably to prepare for an eventuality that, if the Ukrainian counteroffensive is successful, the Russian propaganda can always show and explain this, defeat to their audiences by saying, "Look, it's a war against us, not by Ukrainians, but it's NATO and America behind it. We are faced with a much larger power, so this is a way for Putin to kind of explain a looming defeat."
Yeah, Peter, essentially, I also want to understand there are two things that are happening with Russia now claiming that it was the United States that orchestrated this entire alleged assassination attempt. Because on one hand, they're saying decision is coming from the United States, but they're also undermining the position of Ukraine. They're saying Ukraine actually can't take any decisions on its own. It's just a puppy. It does what it's told. How do you see that kind of allegation being made against Kyiv?
Well, like I said, it's been made all along, and there's nothing new in it. This is also to show their people, I mean, the Russians themselves. And this is to enable the propaganda to claim that, look, we are here to liberate Ukrainians. It's only this Nazi junta that's taking control of Ukraine, that's supported by the West. Ukrainians are a brotherly nation. They're, in fact, the same nation as we. That's what the Russians are saying. And so we're really not fighting against Ukrainians. We are fighting against much larger forces. But just if you allow me to go back to these allegations
Sure.
of a assassination attempt, that is patently ridiculous on its face, because if you look at the tiny little drone that was traveling, it was shot down over one of the buildings there, where we all know that Vladimir Putin does not simply spend time in buildings. He's mostly in a bunker, and he's hardly ever in the Kremlin. I mean, the Kremlin is maybe for some meetings, but he's outside of Moscow in his residency in Novoogaryovo. And very likely much deeper in the bunker than we could even imagine. So just to say that this was an assassination attempt, I mean, this could play with some uneducated people inside Russia, but it's laughable on its face.
Peter, now I want to talk to you as far as what is the future as far as the war is concerned. In February, it already crossed the one-year mark. Where is this headed? Because Russia is now making it clear with this alleged assassination attempt that the counteroffensive by Moscow is only going to escalate and they will retaliate. How is Ukraine preparing itself? Because we've been hearing about Ukraine's counteroffensive as well, possibly to begin in the south. With these allegations coming up, how do you see this as the next leg as the war is concerned?
Well, you remember we spoke with you right after this happened,
Yeah.
and I told a couple of days the day before yesterday, and I said that we're facing a very interesting night ahead of us. We've had shellings over the last 4 nights, and it sure did happen. It happened yesterday as well. Shellings continue. The area where I was near the SBU, which is the Ukrainian security service. There was a missile heading for it, and I was there nearby in a bomb shelter. Thank God, our air defense systems held. We've had a tremendous success hitting and disabling most of these rockets. So when you talk about this dangerous new escalation, the Russians have already thrown everything they have at Ukraine, minus the nuclear weapons. The Americans are saying that the chance of using nuclear weapons, especially in response to an attack by a tiny drone, is not very likely, and I think it would be ridiculous. And some of the, Russians, members of the so-called Party of War, Mr. Prigozhin, head of Wagner Group, he himself has said this shows weakness. If we are like nuclear saber rattling in response to a tiny little drone, this show us as weak. So I think the calculation remains. Ukrainians are not daunted by any threats of escalation anymore. They have nowhere to go but ahead. They need to liberate as much of their territory as possible, and only then we can start talking about a durable peace with the Russians. They have to leave Ukraine's territory. They have to start paying massive reparations, and only then can a very slow process of healing begin.
Okay, Peter, we leave the conversation there. Appreciate you taking out the time and joining us this afternoon. Let's play out some other reactions as well. The reaction that is coming in from the Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky, who arrived in Netherlands in a bid to drum up the support in face of Russia's war on Ukraine. Now, Zelensky visited the airbase and urged the International Criminal Court to bring Russia to justice for its invasion of Ukraine. Earlier during the day in The Hague, the Ukrainian president urged the global community to hold Russian President Putin accountable. He also told the ICC judges that Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, will face an international war crimes court when Ukraine wins the war against Russia.
Dear people, first of all, people of the Netherlands, and I'm glad to be in your strong country now, the land of freedom and justice, which are universal values, and it is about these things that I will speak today. Of course, we all want to see different Vladimir here in The Hague, the one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win, and we will win. And when we win not just on the battlefield, not just against this aggression, look at how countries around the world are coming together to help Ukrainians defend themselves. What is at the heart of this desire to help? The feeling that more than the fate of one country is at stake. The feeling that more can be achieved than the defeat of one aggressor. We can now stop wars of aggression as such. We can defeat aggression as a criminal idea that originates in the mindset of someone who is used to impunity.
The Netherlands is determined to continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in their endeavor to withstand Russian aggression. We will continue to contribute substantially to enhancing Ukraine's military potential. I can inform you that the Netherlands is supplying the ICC with a mobile laboratory for forensic research in Ukraine, so crucial for bringing those responsible to justice.